So one of the first questions we normally get when we're talking to people about our project is, where on earth is Longyan? Because it seems that outside of China, very few people have heard of it. And why did we choose to build our distillery there? So before I answer that question, let's start with a bit of context and explain where Longyan is within China and what's its proximity to some of the better known cities that people would have heard of. So in terms of connectivity to some more familiar city names, Fuzhou, the provincial capital, it's about 3 hours away. Xiamen, which is one of the coastal cities, it's about 50 minutes by train. But then when you start talking about the Pearl River Delta, which is in the bottom left-hand corner of this screen right now, so Guangzhou, 4.5 hours away, Shenzhen, as little as 4 hours away, even Hong Kong. So with a high-speed train, Hong Kong is only 5 hours away, directly from West Kowloon. So Shanghai, it's about 6 hours away by high-speed train, or an hour and 45 minutes if you prefer to fly. Beijing, which is of course the capital of China, between 10 and 12 hours by high-speed train, or between 2.5 hours and 3 hours if you prefer to fly. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Longyan, it's a prefecture-level city in the west of Fujian near to the border of Guangdong. The name roughly translates to Dragon Rock, and the name comes from a famous cave system where the rocks have the texture similar to what people think dragon skin should feel like. It's made up of 4 counties, 2 districts and a city, and it's got a population of around 2.7 million, of which about 1.7 million are urban. A vast city if you compare it to most cities in the West, but actually by Chinese standards, it's quite small. Longyan's famous for mountains, it's famous for rivers, valleys, forests, and about 80% of it is covered in forests. And it's also famous for being one of the traditional heartlands of the Hakka people and their ancient Tulo houses, which are these great big vast castle forts made from rammed earth. So although most people have never actually heard of Longyan, they've probably seen photographs of these huge circular fortified buildings. They're literally everywhere in Longyan, but they aren't just round, there's also some square ones. And I think there's about 23,000 of them all over Longyan. So as a result of the natural beauty and the Tulos, Longyan actually pulls in about 7 million domestic tourists each year. So while Longyan isn't very well known outside of China, it's actually very, very popular within China. But let's get onto our site. So we're actually in Dazhe town, which is about 23 kilometers away from the downtown. It's essentially made up of 13 different villages, about 7,000 people, quite rural. And when we overlay our site onto the top of it, it will give you some understanding. So a couple of buildings we're going to highlight here. Blue is our dormitory building, red is our office building. And then this view here is looking directly north from our site. So as you can see, it's pretty rural. It's actually quite a beautiful part of Longyan. That's the downtown directly below us. And out there towards the west would be Gutian. You can just see now in the background we have some high-speed train networks just in front of us. And that's what gives us connectivity to all over China. Unfortunately, when we took this video, there wasn't a train going past, which would have made it a little bit more interesting. But it will give you also a sense of the perspective of the terrain around where we're based. It's very hilly, very mountainous, and that gives us quite a unique microclimate and a huge amount of rain as well. But where things start to get interesting is a little bit further on. So just below us now, you can see a road. So that's the road that brings us in from the downtown. But just now on the right in the green, it's highlighted, that will be a new high-speed road. And that will change the journey from the downtown from the current 45 minutes to about 25 minutes. And then this is our local village, which is directly outside of our site. Below us now, this is actually a passion fruit farm that we have as neighbours. And just coming to view now, that's our building 1, the space for building 2, building 3 and building 4, all in the centre of the shot. Okay, so let's start with a quick introduction to what it is that we're building. And we're going to start right here in the office with a model that we built a couple of years ago to give people an indication of what it is that we're building. We actually number the buildings to make life easier. So over here, this is building number 1. This is the first cask maturation warehouse. This is building 2. This is a multi-function building where we do malting, milling, mashing and fermenting. Building number 3 is exactly the same as building number 2. And then building number 4 is our still house. We're going to take you over to the site and talk you through all of these buildings. A couple of things to be aware of. This building here, we haven't built yet. What we've done is we've built building 1, 3 and 4 to give us the minimum possible viable solution so that we can get to production as quickly as possible. So over here on this wall, we have some of the early original designs that then led us to the design that we have here and here. We've also got what will be the eventual layouts within these buildings. So this here is the layout of the still house where we have our 10 stills here. This part of the building is where we have the mezzanine floor where visitors can look in and see everything. And we hope eventually it's going to look something like this. So this was the vision that we were trying to recreate with respect to the visitor's experience within the still house. Here and here, these are the layouts for building 3. Although at the moment, we haven't put in all of this hardware yet. We've got a cut down version of that. And also a cut down version of the still house because we've only got the first 3 stills. And then also there's a few examples here of some workshops that we went through together as a team to come up with this solution. Okay, so this is the layout of the hardware that we have currently installed in building 3. So it's a little bit less busy than the original diagram, but as we expand and we need to increase capacity, obviously we can fill this space here. So the center focal point here is the mashton. That's the big large circle in the middle. Over here on the right hand side is where the mezzanine is, which is where the visitors can look in and see everything. And then we've got 8 tanks, 6 of which are fermenters or washbacks, depending upon which terminology you prefer to use. And then the other 2 are hot water tanks as well. To the left of that, we've got all of the CIP. The top corner, that room there is a generator. Then we've got our water treatment. Then we've got our gas. Then we've got our truck loading bay. And we've got our elevators. And then here we've got grain handling. Moving over to here, so this is the still house. Eventually we will have 10 stills, but we're starting with these first 3 here. So we have a 5450, a 5750 and a 15,000 in terms of litres. So as we expand, we'll add 22,000, 30,000, 30,000, 22, and then we'll basically mirror everything. So from a visitor's experience, it's going to be quite interesting to look in from this mezzanine level and take a view of what it is that we're doing here. So welcome to Nine Rivers Distillery. Let me take you on a tour. Okay, so although we have the buildings numbered in sequence from 1 to 4, we're actually going to start with building number 3. So this is the multi-function, multi-purpose building where we do malting, milling, mashing and fermentation. So what we want to do is take you through the process of making whiskey as we will make it here in Nine Rivers Distillery. So coming in, we'll start with some grain handling. Okay, so we've got lots of really interesting and exciting things going on here. But before we come to this stage of the process, first I want to take you through to the grain handling and the milling room, which is just over here. Okay, so come on through. We're going to take you to the grain handling and the milling area. It's actually a section of the building that's cut away and separated with concrete walls. The reason being is because grain handling and the dust and the flour that it creates is both flammable and explosive. It's actually quite a busy room. It's staggered over 3 different levels. So we've got a lot of things going on here. We've got the grain coming in from the floor above where we'll be doing the malting. It then goes into some silos that I'm going to show you in a moment. It then goes through a screening process to take out all of the impurities. Then it gets milled. Then it gets mixed with water. And then we actually pump it into the mash tun. So a few key highlights. So this is the mill here. And if you come this way, we have 3 silos, which when fully loaded are about 56 tons of grain.
This monster here, this is all about dust management because the dust is both explosive and flammable. And if you come this way and take a look in that direction, you can start to see where a lot of the things are going on here with the milling room, and you can probably see right up there to the 3rd level. We'll take you up there quickly and show you what it looks like. Right, come on up. It's still a bit of an obstacle course because this is still about 2 weeks away from being ready, but at least you can get to see what goes on here. So this will give you a bit of an understanding of the size and the scale that we have here. These are the tops of the silos, and you might be able to see there the hole in the ceiling above, which is where the grain will come in from one of the 2 malting floors. Okay, so after grain handling, and we've mixed together the milled grains and the liquid, the water, we're then going to pump it out here into what is the heart of the distillery. This is where a lot of really exciting things happen that most people don't really appreciate. Everybody gets excited and interested in stills. They don't necessarily think about the processes that happen before the distillation. So come up and take a look, and I'll show you the mash tun and the fermenters. So this is our mash tun, or as we call it, our managed tun, named after one of our investors. This is a 30-ton vessel, so this will be taking between 7 and 10 tons of grain, depending upon what mix we're doing at the time, and then we'll eventually run 30,000 litres of water through it, start with basically a mashing cycle, and then we'll do some sparging, and then all of that liquid will go into one of these fermenters. We have 4 of them here. We have another 2 here, and then the last 2 tanks, those are hot water tanks. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take you underneath the mash tun so you can see just exactly how big this thing is. Okay, so this is the underbelly of the mash tun, but what we're going to do is we're going to get a close-up, and we're going to take you around so you can get right underneath. We're just going to walk around this side, past 4 of the fermenters. It also gives you an opportunity to really start to appreciate the scale of these things. 30,000 litres each. It's a pretty serious amount of wash to be dealing with at any one point in time. We're also going to walk past our water treatment room, which is here, and these 4 tanks along here are for our CIP, but we'll come back to those in a moment. Let's start here. Here we have a motor. So this motor essentially creates movement within the mash tun during the mashing process to ensure that everything is mixed evenly and consistently. And there you go, to give it a sense of scale. I'm about 1.8 meters tall. So it is small. And then just over here, this is where all of the spent grains go after the mashing process. They're expelled into this, and then we convey them away to our spent grain silo, which is outside. We'll show you that later on. But let's move on. So this is our CIP system. It's a 4-tank system, essentially so that we can reuse as much of the liquid as possible. Cleaning is something that's very, very water intensive. So where we can save water, we'll save as much as we possibly can. Next part of the process, let's take a look at the water treatment room. It needs a bit of a sweep. We're nearly there. But essentially we have a 4-stage water treatment process. So we have sand filters, charcoal filters, activated carbon filters, and then right at the back we have reverse osmosis. So absolutely everything that comes in here all goes through that process and then goes into the tanks behind, which are buffer tanks, and these tanks then feed the hot water tanks and the cold water tanks for other parts of the process. But while we're here as well, I'll take you over to what we call the tunnel room. So with this amount of fermentation that's going on and the stills being in another building, what we've aimed to do is not to spoil the aesthetics by running pipes through the air connecting buildings. So we've actually built an underground tunnel. So come and have a look. Okay, so this is what I call the tunnel room. It's not really a technical term. It's just the easiest way to describe it. But you can come and take a look here. We're running all the pipes between the two buildings. So that's pipes to take wash, fermented wash to the stills. And it's also for taking steam to the stills. And it's also dealing with all of the electrical, because all of the electrical distribution is based in this building as well. So a lot of the control equipment is just behind you in these cabinets. And then over this side, we have two chillers. And these two chillers essentially take care of the two cooling towers that we have at the moment. There's one on the roof of building 3, one on the roof of building 4. And then last but by no means least, we have a compressor as well. So one of the interesting things about this building is it's actually quite a challenging piece of engineering that goes on here. There's a few things that had to be taken into consideration when we were designing it and architecting it and resolving all the engineering challenges. One of those is the amount of weight on this floor. So when this building is fully loaded, there's about 1,500 tons of equipment when they're all fully loaded. So that's obviously a challenge in terms of making a floor strong enough to support that load. But the other thing is that it's actually sitting on top of 2 massive water reservoirs. One of the unique things about China and the requirements for fire safety is that you have to have enough water on your site stored, ready to be used in case of a fire. So for us, we have to put out something like 547 litres per second for 30 minutes and still have enough water to fight fire for 3 hours. So as a result of that, we have 1.8 million litres of water underneath this floor. Okay, so after introducing the fact that we have 1.8 million litres of water underneath the floor of building 3, I think it makes sense to show you what it looks like. Come with me. So welcome to our fire suppression. If you take a look around you, we essentially have 4 of these huge pumps. These are the pumps that are serving all of the sprinkler network. We also have some smaller pumps. Those smaller pumps, as you can see an example here, these are serving the fire hydrants outside the site. So you'll see lots of red fire hydrants sticking out of the ground. Excuse me. Just over here, you might be able to see a silver ladder. And this silver ladder goes up to a gateway at the top, and you can open the gateway and look in, and there's 900,000 litres of water there. And we also have the same on the other side. And then to give you a sense of scale, these are the pipes that are taking the water out of these reservoirs to then distribute around the site in the case of a fire. Okay, so everything we've shown you so far in this building won't be accessible to the public. So this is an operational floor. This will be for staff only. So what we're going to show you now is what will the visitor's experience be. So they will come up these stairs, they're going to turn left, up the staircase to the left, and then up to the mezzanine floor, going past what we call our plenum wall. So come and have a look. So the plenum wall is essentially where we display the names of all of the people that are supporting our project. Most of them are investors. Some of them are just people that really want to see this project become a success. So we've got everybody's names up here. It covers all of this up towards the entrance to the mezzanine, and then it goes down the other side as well. So this would be the first part of the visitor's experience. They'll come right here to building 3. They'll come to this mezzanine floor, and from here they'll be able to see absolutely everything that we have going on in the production area with respect to the mashing and the fermentation. And well, come and take a look. We're pretty sure people won't feel very cramped here. But please come and see the visitors' experience. There is the mash tun, dead center, and you can see we have the fermenters and the hot water tanks, and the whole idea being complete transparency, so everybody can see absolutely everything. Also, one thing that we do have here, to the left and to the right, we have areas for functions. So I'll show you the first function area. So this is one of our first function areas. This is on the south side of building 3. Again, we've got a decent amount of space here, so if we wanted to do some events or some tastings or some flights, this is where we could do that. But it also gives the people a different perspective on everything that we're doing here. The other thing we have is we also have another event space over that side of the building on the north side. It's a little bit bigger. I'm going to take you over there and explain why it's bigger and what its function will be. So this is the event space on the north side of the building. As you can see, it's considerably bigger. The one on the south side actually ends about here, because in that corner of the building, that's where we have the grain handling and the milling. So we will put a glass partition here with some glass doors, and then all of this space here will be a laboratory for testing, for sampling, for analysing, and also for growing our own yeast cultures. So from here, this area being our laboratory, me being a bit of a nerd and a bit of a geek, I personally think that view is absolutely beautiful. At the moment, of course, that's only 6 fermenters and 2 tanks. There'll be another 10 fermenters in this building. So you can start to imagine what this is going to start to look like. Okay, so far we've only actually covered the ground floor and the mezzanine floor. So now we're going to go up to the second floor in some countries, or if you're from the UK, this would actually be the first floor. So come on up, we'll show you around. Okay, so here we are on the first one of our malting floors. Once again, it's all about openness, transparency, and allowing visitors to see absolutely everything. So we have all of this space here for visitors, and while they're here, they're able to come up and look directly through these windows and see us malting grain on the floor. As impressive as that looks, that's only half of it. So none of this area will be accessible to visitors because we have to keep it completely clean and hygienic because of the fact that we'll be malting grains here. But we also have another malting floor through here. Okay, so this is the second malting floor. It's about the same size in terms of square meters as the first one that we've just come through. And in total together, these 2 floors are about 1,700 square meters. We do lose a little bit of space in the corner because that's where we have the goods elevators for bringing things up from the truck loading bay. And you might notice that massive pipe. That is part of the dust handling for the milling room, which is directly below. So once the grain is malted, whether it's on this floor or the floor that we've just come from, directly next to this, it will go this way, through this set of doors, to an area where we will have some grain roasters. So that's the visitors' observation area that we first came to give you a sense of perspective as to where we are within the building. And as mentioned, when the malt is malted, we'll take it through here into this room, and this is where we'll start making some magic. Okay, so we'll have a grain roaster here, we'll have a grain roaster here, and then essentially what will happen is we'll have a crane system fixed into the beams here that will lift the grains in by bags, by bulk bags, drop them through these hatches, and then down below here we have the silos from the milling room where we visited earlier on. So just down there, a slightly better angle and a better view so you can start to see what's going on the floor below. We were there earlier on. Okay, so this here is part of the dust management system. So these are essentially collecting all the dust that comes off the milling process and then goes through this pipe network here, and it vents out through the west side of the building through the pipes that we just saw on the malting floor. But one of the things that I really do love about this building, and specifically here, is the view that we get of building number 1. That's the Cask maturation warehouse. If you're feeling a little bit of deja vu, it's probably because this is exactly the same as the floor below. So this would be the 3rd floor in China. If you're in the UK, 2nd floor. And again, great big open area here for visitors to be able to come in and see that we have complete transparency. And as you can see, it's exactly the same. And because of that, we won't bore you by walking all around it because you've seen everything on the floor below. So this is the 4th floor, and although there's not really much going on here, we still have the same idea of complete transparency, complete visibility to all visitors, so they can actually come up to this floor and take a look through the windows and see what we do, although this floor will only be used for storing dry goods. So glass bottles, cardboard boxes, packaging, labels, things like that. But one thing that is worth looking at is, apart from the fact you can now see the full length of the building, you'll also notice that this floor is actually considerably lower. And that's narrower even, excuse me. That's because we've cut off the sides on the north and the south to create some gardens. One other thing worth pointing out, there is a steel tube coming through the floor. That's actually a chimney, and that is a chimney for the mash tun. It actually runs from the ground floor right the way up to the roof, but we've just not mentioned it yet. We'll mention it from the roof. Okay, so this is the north side of the building, and we previously mentioned cooling towers. So this is one of them, and as you can see, we have a little bit of lawn here. It's recently laid, so it doesn't look amazing, but give it a couple of weeks of rain and sun, and it should look fantastic. And over here on the south side of the building, a little bit of difference. We do actually have a set of stairs that leads us up to what will hopefully be our primary event space, and that will be the roof terrace. So come up and have a look. So here we are up on the roof of building number 3. First thing to explain, this tower here, I did mention it on the floor below. This is actually the chimney for the mash tun. So the mash tun is obviously cooking up all the grains and all the water. There'll be steam and vapors that come off that, and that has to be vented through this here. As for the rest of the roof, when the weather's good, we're planning to use this for events. So we could probably host a couple of 100 people here at one time. Over here, this building here will be a whiskey bar. And eventually, in a couple of years' time, we'll be having our own whiskies there as well. But one thing I personally love about the roof here is it's a fantastic way to take a look around and enjoy the environment that we're in and start to appreciate the geography, the terrain, the mountains, and just the beauty of being here. Okay, so now we're finished in building number 3. In terms of the production process, once we've milled the grains, mashed, fermented, then what we do is we pipe everything over here through the tunnel into the still house. So come with me and I'll show you around. Okay, so the first part of the visitor's experience right here within the still house is here, where they can walk in and they can take a look inside the still house. So again, everything is completely transparent and completely open, and they can see everything. In all fairness, this probably isn't the most exciting view because everything is elevated, but that's why we've built a mezzanine floor in here as well, so that above here, the visitors can have a view that sweeps in to kind of match those illustrations that we had on the wall in the office. So let's take you up. Okay, so once again, building on this mezzanine concept and having everything available for everybody to see, we've got a decent area here. Coming in, take a look. It's about 160 square meters in total space. So more than enough to host 40 people at a time, I guess. And they will get to enjoy this view. So it looks a bit gnarly at the moment. We still need to clean and polish and get everything sorted out. But eventually, with the 10 stills here and this view for visitors, it should be something quite spectacular. And as far as we know, there's nothing really like it anywhere in the world. One thing that can be seen from this floor, though, is through here, this will be the room where we actually fill the casks. So again, visitors, as part of the visitors' experience, will be able to see everything that goes on in there. We'll be piling up casks, filling them up with new make spirit, and then taking them to the first cask maturation warehouse at the south of the site. Okay, so here we are on the floor of our still house. This is an open plan design, as you can see. It's about 1,000 square meters in terms of total footprint. And one of the things that we do have here that a lot of people don't have is the sheer height. So internally, these ceilings are 13 meters. And we've done that for a number of different reasons. Number one, because it matches the cask maturation warehouses. And the reason we've done that is because it gives us passive cooling. One of the challenges that you do have with distillation, as much as you need to heat everything up, you also need to be able to cool it down, to condense it back into liquid, because that then becomes your spirit. There are parts of the world, including Scotland, where sometimes of the year it's just too hot and they can't actually distill because the weather's too hot to then condense the vapors again. So we've solved that problem in a way that we think is very, very cost effective and very environmentally friendly, because it doesn't actually take any energy to create this cooling. It's very, very simple, grade school physics. Warm air rises, and as the warm air rises, it vents out through all of these open windows that we have on both sides. Okay, so let's go up to the operating platform where we have our first 3 stills. So again, as with building 3, one of the things we had to consider here was the sheer amount of weight that will be on this floor. So similar in terms of the amount of physical mass, there's about 1,000 tons of weight on this floor once it's fully loaded. So we've ended up with a floor that's about 2 meters thick. Okay, so the start of our distillation process in this phase will initially start here. This is a 15,000 litre wash still. So once we have the wash from building number 3, it's going to run through this. Obviously it will heat up. We'll get vapours that go up the neck, along the lye pipe, down the condenser, into the subcooler, and eventually will come out through the spirit safe. That will then get collected into a tank below, which we call the low wines tank. Then we'll run it through one of these 2 spirit stills. Same process in a sense that you heat it, vapors up the neck along the lye pipe, condenser, subcooler. The difference being in the spirit safe for the 2 spirit stills, we have the ability to cut off. So the first lot that comes through, which will be the 4 shots and the heads, we don't really want to keep much of that. We want to put that elsewhere. Then we want to collect the middle cut, and then the last bit of the run, which is the tails, we'll put that into another tank as well, which we won't use. But everything in the middle, that becomes the new make whiskey. And of course, we showed you the tunnel in building 3. This is where the tunnel exits, right here into the still house. So this is bringing in the wash, but it's also bringing in the steam. And then once we've done the distillation for the wash, the spent wash then comes along these pipes here and goes out into our spent wash tank. We're going to show you that in a moment. We've given it a name. It's It's called the Herminator. So with me being a bit scared of heights, what I've done is I've got a proxy. So this is the Herminator. If you thought the tanks inside building 3 were big, then you'll be impressed with this. That is 140,000 litres, or 140 tonnes in old money. So there we go. Come on, climbing proxy. You can come back down now. Thanks for that. So now we've actually done the still house and we've introduced you to the Herminator. Let's take a walk around the west side of the site. So this is the northwest corner. We're going to go up here towards the grain silo. But while we're on the way, this piece of land over here is where we're building our gas terminal. Construction of that starts on Thursday of next week. So that's in 5 days. And then the other thing worth pointing out is at the back of the still house, we have 2 rooms here. These will be for bottling. There's a slightly smaller one, a slightly larger one. The smaller one will be for VIP cask owners, for them to bottle their own cask. And the slightly bigger one, that will be for all of our single cask bottlings and our ultra premium products made with malt that we malt here on the malting floors. Most of them will only be available for purchase right here on the site. So that will not only help support the fact that they will be premium products, but also make them a bit more exclusive. Okay, so this white vent here, that's actually the exhaust for our 2 megawatt generator that we have here for backup, just in case the electricity fails. We have 2 diverse routes of power that all get focused in on the north side of building 3. It's the only place we couldn't take you into because it's actually not really safe to go in those kind of rooms. But if both of those routes fail, we have the generator, it will automatically kick in, and that makes sure that we can still power all the pumps in case of a fire. Other things of note here, the grain silo. So once the grain is used in the mash tun and it comes out of the mash tun into the spent grain hopper, it then gets brought out to here. We fill this up from the top, and then this spout here, this would basically just fill flatbed trucks that would come here to collect it. Apart from that, the doors here at the top of the steps, just to give you a sense of perspective, that takes you directly into our water treatment room. And then these doors here with this shutter, behind that is our gas boiler. And then finally, we have the truck loading bay for building number 3. So we'll be able to back trucks in there for deliveries and also for taking away goods to be sold. And then we have the 2 elevators here in the corner. What we'll do now is we're going to take a walk south and we're going to head towards building 1 and show you around that. Okay, so this is obviously the plot for building 2, which we're going to build probably towards the end of this year. We'll start building, so the end of 2025, running into 2026. What we're going to do with that in the meantime is we're going to collaborate with Longyan Agricultural University and use this as a test pilot plot. We're going to grow all of the fruits and vegetables that grow locally. We're going to split the site in 2. One side is just going to be rain fed, and the other side is actually going to be watered with our spent wash. What we're trying to do is prove how spent wash is utilized in other parts of the world to fertilize crops and fertilize fields. And once we've proven that, we will then give that away to all of the local farmers for free in hopes that it will discourage them from using chemical fertilizers. As I'm sure you know, chemical fertilizers, especially when used excessively, aren't very good for the environment and definitely aren't very good for the people that are eating the food. So if we can get them all onto something much more natural, that then helps us to not only support the local community, but be embraced by the local community as well. So welcome to building number 1. This is our first cask maturation warehouse. There's a few things to show you in here, not least the fact that, again, we're still building on this whole concept of everything being completely open, completely transparent, to everybody that visits. So they can come in here into the initial reception. We then have a corridor that takes you to a central area from where visitors can see into the 4 different zones that make up this building. One of the things that's also worth looking at is over here you can start to see the size and the scale of the fire suppression network that we have. So these pipes here are for feeding the sprinkler systems. If you take a look through this window, you'll be able to see on the ceiling, that's the intensity of the sprinklers that you have to install here in China for fire suppression, which is not like anything else anywhere in the world, to the best of my knowledge anyway, and to the best of the knowledge of everybody involved in this project. But let's go this way, I'll take you through. So one thing you'll notice, building onto what we were talking about in the still house with respect to these internal ceilings. So that's 13 meters high. And to the best of our knowledge, nobody else has ever done this before. There are obviously some pretty big cask maturation warehouses, or dunnages as they're called in Scotland. A lot of them using a palletized system, but we've not heard of anybody going to these kind of extremes. But again, this is all about creating as much cooling as we possibly can, because one of the biggest challenges we will have here is the heat. In the summer, it can hit 40 degrees, and that could result in the whiskey maturing too quickly. So we want to slow that process down as much as we possibly can. But in the same instance, if you're doing it with air conditioning, not only would it be ridiculous in terms of cost, but it just wouldn't be really good for being environmentally friendly. So we're trying to use some basic schoolboy science. Okay, so this would be the northwest corner of this cask maturation warehouse. Again, you can see the intensity of the sprinklers. You can also see the height of the ceiling. What we plan to do is fill it up with casks to just below the white line of the beam just under the windows. So that is basically about a 6 meter point, which is typically in line with most traditional cask maturation warehouses, leaving the rest of that space purely and simply for cooling, for passive cooling. Okay, so this is the same zone we were just looking at a few minutes ago through the glass window. So you can kind of get a sense of the size and the scale here. We're hoping that we should be able to get about 1,500 casks in this zone. So with 4 zones, we'll get about 6,000 casks per warehouse. One of the things that does constrain us in China is there are a lot of limitations and restrictions on the total footprint that you can have for what's called a Type A building. So our still house and our cask maturation warehouse, due to them both having high ABV alcohol and being both flammable and explosive, they're classified as Type A. So we can't have more than 1,500 square meters as a footprint for a Type A building. The other restriction you have is they can only be single story. So if you take a look at other parts of the world, for example, in the USA, where they have rick houses, they can have 8 floors, 10 floors, whatever. You just can't do that here in China. So that's essentially why we've ended up with a lot of what we have in terms of the style, the shape, the design, and the functionality, because we have that rigid set of regulations to work within. It's quite a rigid framework. Okay, so a little bit of a trivial thing here. You'll notice we have these drains everywhere, all over the floor. It's one of the many things about the rules and regulations around construction in China. So as we've already been through the fire suppression standards here, which are exceptionally high, there's also regulations around what happens in the event of a fire and your sprinkler system comes online. Where can that water go to? So you can't put the water directly into the sewers to go to the local wastewater treatment plant. What you have to do is you have to actually collect it. So we have all these drains everywhere, and these drains go directly to a vast underground reservoir that we have just here in the southwest corner of the site. Okay, so in the event of a fire and the sprinkler system kicks in and all the water goes through those drains, where it ends up is over here. Because directly below us is an absolutely massive underground concrete reservoir. And then what would happen is, after all of this fire suppression water is collected, we would have to bring tanker trucks on site, and it would have to be trucked off to a specialised industrial wastewater treatment plant as opposed to the local communal plants.
So as we start bringing this video to a close, I just want to show you the future plans for expansion. So directly below us, that's where our gas terminal is going to be built, on that concrete pad right there. I just want to get a little bit of altitude to just show you that's our complete site there now. That's the plot that we already have and we've been building on. I'm just going to flip the drone around a little bit. So now we have north at the top, and I'm going to overlay some graphics on top of this to show you the piece of land that we're currently negotiating for, which is 4 times bigger than the plot that we have. So here it is outlined in red. Our existing plot is blue. We're then going to chop that into 4 sections and fill each section with another 4 cask maturation warehouses. So that's what it will look like eventually. Now moving on to another piece of land. This piece of land here we already own. I'm going to highlight that and then show you what that's for. So we've bought this to build a cooperage. That's the plot that we have in blue. We'll have another cask warehouse at the bottom, and the red area will be our cooperage.
So there's our overview of what we've been keeping ourselves busy with over the last couple of years here in Longyan. What started off as an idea from a bunch of whiskey enthusiasts from all over the world and met with raised eyebrows and big question marks, not just from the people that weren't involved in the project, but also from some of the people who actually were involved. Was it possible for us to even build a distillery, let alone building what will be China's biggest single malt whiskey distillery? Even the 2 biggest Western alcohol conglomerates, Diageo and Pernod Ricard, they haven't had the same ambition for China that we've had. Diageo, they've got a $125 million project, and it's expected to have about 2 million LPA of capacity at their facility in Yunnan. Pernod Ricard, with their $150 million investment in Sichuan, they've only got about 1 million LPA of production capacity. We go live as we stand right now with 1.31 million LPA of capacity, and we can ramp up to about 3 million LPA simply by adding more hardware. With building 2, housing 2 more mash tuns and another 20 fermenters, we'll be up to 7.5 million LPA. That doesn't just make us the biggest single malt whiskey distillery in China, but we'll be in the top 10 globally. So if you ever find yourself in China and you're interested in our story, then why not come along and pay us a visit?